Welcome to the Grid Mod Pod, brought to you by AEIC. In this podcast, you'll hear from the utility industry's top operations leaders on how their companies are working to modernize and improve our ever-evolving power grid. Thanks for joining us.
Francis, I'm so happy to have you today to talk about some of my favorite topics where it all began around distributed energy resources. So, audience, today we have Frank. He is the director of the Grid Modernization program at PPL and also the current chair of the AEIC DER Subcommittee. And that's what we're here today to talk about. Can I have a favorite? I'm not supposed to have a favorite now in my new role. So the reason why AEIC means so much to me, DER. So Francis, take a moment. Let's introduce yourself to the audience and we'll jump right in.
Well, Liz, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, the listening audience, for tuning in today to this podcast. So, as Liz said, I'm Francis Frank. I'm the Director of Grid Modernization at PPL and also the Chair of the AEIC DER Subcommittee. And that's, if we have new people to the podcast, Association of Edison Illuminating Companies. So, the DR Subcommittee is a subcommittee under the Power Delivery Committee, and our focus is all things DER, photovoltaic, wind, microgrids, EVs, just name it. Anything that could be considered distributed generation, that will be our committee. So thank you once again.
When we think about the origins for any of our new listeners, this podcast actually started with all things DER. And the objective of creating that was, at the time, I was the chair of the DER. And the term in itself creates a lot of topics that can be really discussed and expanded upon, because something that's happening that we're in the midst of is the fourth industrial revolution. And you and I get to be a part of it. So it's pretty exciting. But a big part of that revolution is the enablement of new technologies. And you mentioned them, so anything that can generate at the edge of the grid that is more, available to the masses, aka solar, which, has been around for a while now, but is kind of finally getting its bearings. And then battery energy storage. And then electric vehicle charging. And there's this phenomenon of charging to and from, aka vehicle to grid. And really anything that is a technological advancement that enables the customer to be dynamic. So that's DER. And with that comes the work that is required to transform how us electric utilities serve our customers. And so that's what we get together and talk about, right, Francis?
Yeah, I could not say it a little better myself. That's yes. It.
And I also have learned from this space, it really helps to say things, maybe not just once, but sometimes 7 times until, it really resonates with the individual listener. So we're not going to say it 7 times a day, but the gist of it is it's a very large definition and there's a lot of things to tackle. So, as a member of the DER membership, the one part of this series of the Grid Mod Pod is really just to highlight that there are these committees, right? And there is this membership that us, the utility folk, can be a part of, which is AEIC, which is a mouthful. So from your perspective as a current member, what do you think the current criteria is to be engaged in these conversations and this committee itself?
Yeah, great question. So since your company is part of the larger body of Association of Edison Illuminating Companies, or AEIC, you can be part of the DR subcommittee. And that is if you have a large DR program or you're starting in the DR space. Because in the DR space, in our subcommittee, we basically use that opportunity to learn from each other. And we take that time to share the knowledge, to share the lessons learned, to share even the mistakes, the challenges and the opportunities as well in the industry. So since your company is a member, you can be a member of the DR subcommittee, and we welcome you with open arms, and you can come in our monthly meetings. You can contact myself, Francis Frank. You can contact Liz. My co-chair is Jazip Singh from APC, Arizona Power. Feel free to reach out to any one of us and we will get you registered. We'll get you to be a member. We have 2 meetings annually, a spring meeting and a fall meeting that you're welcome to come to present, just to be an observer, what have you, whatever facets you want to take. We always welcoming new members. We always ready to get new members volunteering. We always willing to get new presenters as well.
Right. And I think, and you said it kind of in your answer, for those that are listening, either if you are a member, you can be a part of the continuous discussion. I think that in the value of the discussions is it is utility members that come together and talk all about really operational excellence, which is a term that I think a lot of us may say or may even read and don't understand the weight and the importance, especially during this transformational time. And so it's about not only the what and the why. So what is the technology? Why is this technology becoming available? And then really what is changing on how the electric utility does to continue to serve safe, reliable, affordable power. What we really get to the crux of is conversations around the how and really the who. So I guess another idea, maybe to share with this audience is, those that come to the table for these very robust conversations to drive just awareness with each other, the gaps, and then developing conversation around best practices and guidelines to really deploy, embrace, inspire, whatever it may be, the various people, technologies, and processes. But it's the operational folk, right? So, Francis, when you said, there's a lot of utilities embracing the term grid modernization, which is, in itself, and you can repeat it as you see it, but like the fundamental technologies that are really required to enable the distribution grid to be different. So it is the operational folk, the ones that are doing particular tasks. So from your perspective, and even our journey, the last 5 or even 7 years, it went from the operations of the control room and the planners planning the grid to now this newer groups that are showing up within utilities that are kind of expanding across what? So just from your perspective, what realm does your seat and your peers that are in the DR work within the utility?
Yeah, so in most utilities, we're part of operations, electric operations. Most companies have it within their distribution operations group because it's edge devices, right? If you're behind the meter, especially, some utilities are already behind the meter in controlling DR assets behind the meter. But at the end of the day, most of these companies have it within distribution operations. Now, it's not one size fit all, I must say that I've seen some of it being within the IT because since it's new technology, it's considered like OT, operational technology. So I've seen that connection between all-encompassing technology group that has the traditional information technology and this new OT or operation technology team as well. So it's not one size fit all, but traditionally what we're seeing in industry is within operation and specifically between distribution operation.
Yes. And I think, one thing that we found out from, our reoccurring attendance in the discussions is, and really to the utility members listening, to really those, external stakeholders listening to this podcast, trying to learn and understand, there's a place for really an awareness of this cohort and this, organization, because what we've found is there's a lot of language, a lot of vendor engagement. There's a lot of vested resources in creating the ability to have full situational awareness of all the assets. And so when I say that's a mouthful, but it's the sensors, it's the actual hardware, it's the communication network, And it's really the data strategy once you kind of deploy all of these various technologies, that now that you're starting to have the opportunity to pull data back that can really show distributions, assets, performance like it's never been before. What these conversations really kind of get into and, agree with, and maybe you can share, for instance, some, valuable insights that you gained from the attendance, is like we talk about ADMS, Advanced Distribution Management System. We talk about the importance of the advanced meter infrastructure and the data that is available. We talk about, and this is high level, like industry wise, we talk about what are we going to do about electric vehicles? How is the solar going to interact with the grid? But what we get into the weeds is the granular, minute, information that not a lot of people, like a lot of people look, maybe overlook of how challenging it can be if you don't have all of your various businesses within a utility understanding the need for various particular data points, right? So that's the fun, I think, of our conversations. We get into really hearing what has worked, what hasn't, and then really start to craft your own personal, like, best practice guidelines so you can take that back and really drive it internally. So, like, for your experience, what are some things that you've taken from some of the robust conversations that you're like, you had aha moments?
So there are two things in particular. First and foremost, the R&D portion of it, the research and development, because since this is really a new realm in the industry, they ought to have a lot of research and development put into it, and that takes resources, right? Most utilities, as we know, O&M is not something that we like to talk about, right? Operational expense. But it takes that investment and that leadership from the top to come down to say, hey, you can go ahead and do this and figure out how will this battery affect the feeder? Or how will this charging network placed by either the utility or by some other vendor affect the feeder or the transformer? Or how the AMI network can be used to place something else on it besides just AMI data. What if you want to use it to place inverters communication and things like that? And secondly is the human resource aspect of it. The traditional personnel within the utility industry, engineers, no, we have different roles, and I smile at that. The data scientists, the analysts, they even I've went to Southern Cal Edison, and they have a meteorologist on the staff. And that meteorologist is not just about the weather, but is actually looking for different patterns and stuff like that. And that to me was fascinating to see how the industry is evolving, that the other skill sets are coming into the industry and adding value, and how our traditional roles are even now evolving. I tell my interns and young engineers that, listen, you need to understand Python. You need to understand scripting. You need to understand these type of things as well to be well-rounded, multifaceted than just a traditional mechanical, civil, electrical engineering that we traditionally go for. And that takes a lot for leadership, because the leadership have to be aware of that and present that type of training, aware of the different hiring processes, the different strategies that will attract these other individuals that traditionally were not part of the pool that we look for, but now we actually looking to attract them as well and competing with the big technology companies as well, because we want the same thing. So it's a very exciting time, and these are some of the things that I've learned as I interact with my peers in.
Yeah. And I guess I just have, since you brought it up, and we say the word a lot, is this idea, right? It's not just our typical power grid that some of us didn't even know what it existed for when we were going to college until we were realized what an electric utility is. But from those external stakeholders looking in and trying to understand, can the transformation happen quicker? Why isn't the progress moving? And I guess I said at the beginning of the podcast, the origin of these discussions is really to highlight that the utilities are at the forefront. And there has been a significant amount of work in regards to what you just said in regards to the R&D, in regards to developing the resources and being a part of the transformation. But because our business model is maybe a little bit different than your typical businesses that we're all used to, there's a lot of hurdles and challenges. And I think, what I learned a lot from the DER subcommittee was the robust conversation around the people part and realizing what we were trying to do was absolute change. And the word change from an engineering perspective, it was like a delta, right? But we didn't learn in school or really anywhere about the value of understanding people and how they manage the change. So I think a lot of my conversations was just hearing how challenging it was for the individual peers across the whole nation to communicate effectively why the data was needed, why the technology to deploy, and how, as you just said, we're going to have to really reskill or onboard new type of thinking, new type of skill set. And so I think the DER subcommittee is at the crux of this change. And, to run a really well-oiled business, it's not just about running it well and more efficiently. It's also ensuring that the organization has this common purpose and they know why they're doing it. So I think a lot of amazing conversations from not even how we met was understanding the purpose of championing change and being able to connect with the people and really being able to tell the story around the very difficult technical challenges that we're all faced with. So it's really about embracing change and managing people. And I think that's something when you think, oh, it's another industry committee where you're coming together talking about technology, but we really find ourselves talking about the technology. But when you boil it down, it's this big change of embracing the IT world.
Yeah,
Maybe we'll be IT experts soon, Francis.
well, I started in IT, so
there you go.
I
See?
definitely appreciate their value, definitely. But to talk about change, definitely we have to be the evangelists every time we in a room, as we compete for the resources, as we compete for capital. We have to show the significant improvement that we can bring to the company, when it comes to things like, for example, hosting capacity. Just talk about that, right?
Right.
Using the feeder beyond these engineered limits and what these distributed energy resources can do in terms of that. These are the things that if we don't have buy-in from the top, or if you don't sing that chorus every day when you meet your peers or meet your leaders, sometimes it gets lost in the whole conversation. So there are definite value to what we do, and just keep sharing the good news, keep sharing how valuable this will be, and this will continue to be, to change the industry going forward. We are the forefront, and I'm excited to be part of it.
Yeah. I guess I'm just gonna, since we're here, we'll peel back the hosting capacity phenomena. I remember, one, I don't think a whole lot of people understand, like 10 years ago, it wasn't really common knowledge or a necessity for distribution companies to have a full electrical, oh, it is electronic, but electrical model. So like having the awareness of not just like where your assets are geographically, but really how every component of the electrical power grid is connected and every asset and the phenomena of which they're there for and the information inside each of those pieces of equipment are logged, and the ability to extract so that we can run these very complicated power flow solutions that the distribution is becoming. We used to be able to do kind of pen and paper, quick Ohm's law, and now we're going into a space where the technology, not only just our advanced meter infrastructure, but all of the assets that are now available to the distribution grid have the ability to talk to each other, to gather an enormous amount of information, and we can create very powerful algorithms for the system to become even more intelligent. It's always been smart. I'm going to give it that, but more capable. And so just for us messengers, our champions of change was really being able to show, just show the ability, let alone have the full capability, is taking those paper maps, importing them into a computer system, such as a piece of software, ingest, putting the inputs or letting it ingest all of this robust information to create this hosting capacity map. So for those that are storytellers, right, once we have the map, then you have to communicate how challenging it was to not only make the map, but then keep the map accurate. So those are some conversations that we've had in the past at DER, is really listening to those that have evolved and been at it for 15 years to those that are just starting, and as the technology and the data and the capabilities more easily available, so that maybe it could be a little bit faster of a journey. So that's why I think it's also valuable that we have the full spectrum of those that are just beginning in this grid modernization enablement of DER, and those very mature utilities that can kind of share their lessons learned and their failures. So for you listeners, now you know how challenging it is to make a hosting capacity map. Maybe you don't, but you should ask us questions, and we're here to help answer us. So Francis, from your perspective, knowing what has been trickling or percolating the last 5-10 years, what do you think the challenges the subcommittee will be kind of discussing and facing in the next, maybe our fall meeting and even in the years to come?
Yeah, so you mentioned the fall meeting, so allow me to give a plug here for the fall meeting, right? So our fall meeting will be in Puerto Rico and will be hosted by Luma in Puerto Rico. And to answer your question specifically, I think that's a great place to go to think about the challenges of the future. Being from the Caribbean myself and looking at the impacts of DR for the Caribbean, I think going to Puerto Rico and sitting there and hear of their issues and trying to figure out how we can help as a committee to help resolve those issues is fascinating. I'm very excited about it. So
yes, we're a lot.
The plug there is definitely to come there in November to the committee. But let me stick on the Caribbean a little bit before I go into more detail. So, as you may be well aware, most of these Caribbean islands are burning diesel still. My island of Grenada, where I'm from, 98% of the power is still produced by diesel. And you might ask yourself, a place or a region that has warm sun, who boasts about comfortable warm sunshine, the beauty of the place, why are we doing that, right? And it's because of the challenges, because of the economics. So it's quite a lot, which I don't want to get into there. But going to Puerto Rico, I think, is the first step that AEIC on a whole is penetrating into the Caribbean. And I would like to see more of the Caribbean utilities, CARILEC, which is the body in the Caribbean that hosts all the electric utilities there. I would like to see them be part of AEIC, because we can definitely help them from a power delivery, which is our big body, but into our sub committees as well, like DR or cost optimization, what have you, here within AIC. So exciting times. There will be challenges, but every challenge is an opportunity, right? So
Yes.
so we will embrace the challenge. We will find ways to resolve our issues, and then we will continue to grow and develop here in the DR subcommittee and AIC as a whole.
One thing, a value of the electric utility industry is because we serve regions or a self-contained geographical space, it really does allow us to have this collaboration amongst competition. So could you say co-opetition? Just kidding. But what really makes us easily share information, unlike other industries, is that we can go and really experience, if you think about what you just said, having all of these mini grids perspective to the very large grids that are on the mainland, is the now that the technology is available, from the bottoms up planning and being able to manage the distribution in a way that can help offset or shift or really unlock a different perspective of transmission and bulk generation. And so being able to do that from the ground up from, these various microgrids, it's a great space for us to see that the technology is available for us to really flip the switch and think about the bigger picture differently. And so I guess I want to put a plug, even though this subcommittee is distributed energy resources distribution, we actually have a lot of members, like a few that are G&T, that are coming to understand, what are the challenges so they can support, their munis and co-ops and their smaller distribution grids that they serve. But also we talked a lot about integration of DER is really the similar topic of integration of inverter-based resources.
Sure.
So just taking on that issue of those challenges and the big discussion that we'll have. And I'll say anything that's kind of coming new to the grid is tied to pretty much an IBR. So there's a whole robust conversation that can happen there. And we have those too. So what I heard you say is, come to our fall meeting, but our future meetings are really going to continue the discussion and really educate our peers that have yet to start, our peers that are in the midst of embracing, and really those that have gone before. We're in a space of continuous improvement. So with the technology rapidly moving and our customers demanding more from understanding how they can manage or utilize their energy, those that have gone before are probably still in the process of continuing. So with that, I kind of wrap up this podcast here, Francis, and I wanted to throw it over to you. Is any shout out or lessons learned or anybody that's sitting out there that's maybe in school and eager to help in our industry, any words of wisdom?
Yeah, so first I want to talk to or probably speak to the utility themselves when we approach the campus. Every utility go onto the campus to recruit new talent. Really and truly, we have to sell the excitement that you can find the challenges and the opportunities in the utility, just as you'll find in the big technology companies. Because we are here today as the utility industry overall, doing the same thing and doing it to save life and better the overall of the world. So definitely, if that's not a selling point, I don't know what is.
Lifeline Society.
Yes, definitely. And Liz, as we wrap up, I really want to thank you again for the opportunity. Thank you for giving me a time today to share my views. I encourage people to come and join the future meetings, join the committee, and let's grow together. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Francis, and I continue to look forward to being on this journey with you as we transform, the grid and enable, the realities that are come to be. So with that, till next time, listeners, be sure to subscribe. And also, as you know, we're available on LinkedIn if you want to get in touch and ask further questions. And we're also responding to any questions or comments in the comment section. So thanks again, Francis.
Thank you.
That's a wrap for this week's episode of the Grid Mod Pod. Thanks for tuning in. We hope today's conversation got you thinking about new and creative ways to improve our power grid. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to be the first to hear new episodes. This podcast is brought to you by AEIC, the place where operations leaders come together to share knowledge and provide guidance to the electric utility industry. We'll be back with a new episode soon. Until then, keep powering on.